Welcome everybody to our fourth interview with the Harrogate and Knaresborough candidates for the general election. So we're having these set of conversations. We're just keen to find out more about the candidates themselves and what they think are the important policies that we should be considering in casting our votes, particularly with a climate emphasis on those policies. I'm Tim Larner, I'm Vice Chair of Zero Carbon Harrogate, and have with me
Shan Oakes.
Shan Oakes. Your surname went out of my head then.
Right.
So,
quite adult by now.
Shan, would you like to just say a bit about yourself? We'd like to know a bit about your background and your journey as a person and your journey politically into the Green Party and how long you've been involved in politics, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you. I'm delighted to be here in this wonderful house too. It's great. I suppose I've always been very, I was kind of brought up by my cat, because I was, like another politician people might have heard of, I was a grocer's daughter, and there were lots of cardboard boxes in our house when I was small, and I used to play in those with my cat, Scrap. Scrap because she was supposed to eat scraps, but she wheedled her way into better sort of food. But yeah, and I think I was very attuned to animals from a very early age, and I got very worried about what was happening to animals. And then from there I moved on to realising it was awful things were happening to humans as well. And I used to campaign at sort of early secondary school age for the World Wildlife Fund.
Right.
I think it was called something different then, but I was always a bit of a campaigner, really, worried about stuff, so I wanted to, might have been to do with my dad dying when I was small, and maybe I felt as though that was partly my fault, I'd not looked after him well enough, something like that, perhaps. So I then went to do English and things, sort of arts at university, and then did a teaching PGCE, and went into teaching English in Hull initially, and English lessons at that point, before the national curriculum, you could very much focus on what the children were interested in, and you could debate things and listen to what they were, and don't sort of direct their gaze, as it were, along the lines of their interest, and find poems or plays or debates about issues. So we did lots on environmental things which interested them and me. I remember a wonderful collage the kids did on the back of our classroom wall, which was all about pollution. Plays like The Crucible, which go into the way humans can manipulate each other and be manipulated. At that time, you could really investigate the way you were manipulated by advertising and that kind of thing, which I suspect, I haven't been teaching for a long time, but I suspect that now teachers are so pressurised and sort of told what to do, that they don't have so much time and energy to do that kind of thing, and to just listen to what the kids are interested in. So I'd never have thought I would be a politician. I was a teacher, and then I went into local government administration in the Education Authority in Humberside, and then York. I did quite a lot of work on special educational needs, administering that, and also community safety at City of York Council. And I think and then Bill and I went to Uganda. And looking back from Uganda to Europe really confirmed for me the problems of all sorts of problems, the warring between sort of European countries, or the sort of competition, and the way that things like genetic modification was trying to get its grip into a place like Uganda, where farmers knew how to save their seeds, and if they'd gone down that road of GM, would have been forced to buy seeds and the products that go with them.
So what were you doing in Uganda?
Well, Bill was, out of the blue, was asked to be Vice Chancellor of a university in Kampala.
Oh,
And so we lived there for 2.5 years.
right.
And I worked with the Forum of Education NGOs Uganda, and also Action Aid, was it?
Yes, Action
I
Aid.
think it was Action Aid. It was a fantastic opportunity. We felt so privileged because of what Bill was doing. We were able to go to the education sector reviews where the whole sort of policy of education in Uganda was discussed, and that whole relationship between the local education professionals and then the donors, the other countries that were putting money into the system, and they were all wanting to pull strings.
Yeah.
And those debates were fascinating.
Yeah.
Should it be technical education or should it be academic?
Yeah. And when you came back?
So when we came back, I did a master's degree in education for sustainability with London South Bank University, and we really decided we had to put all our time and energy into campaigning for sustainability, for a future really, for humans and the other creatures on this planet, because we could see the way things were going.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done
So
since.
where are we in date?
So that was 2004 when we got back.
Okay.
And so I think there was an election going on at the time, and we joined. We had leafleted before we left for Uganda in York for the Green Party, but we hadn't joined.
Yeah.
We joined, and then I stood for the European elections pretty soon after that, and I was second on the Yorkshire and the Humber list of candidates for the Yorkshire Humber Green Party.
Right.
And that was really great to be able to do that. And Bill and I also stood as candidates for Bill for Beverley and Holderness, and I stood. There was a by-election that David Davis was involved in because he resigned on the issue of civil liberties, and I stood against him in Halton, Price and Howden.
Right.
That was, I think, 2009, and in fact came second in that election, and kept my deposit, even though we hadn't done any work. The Green Party in that area hadn't done any work in Halton, Price and Howden before that.
Right.
So that was very heartening. We knew he would get back in, but to come second was great.
And you've been embedded in the local community since then, or were you still in York then?
That was when we were based in Beverley, and we moved to Knaresborough in 2014.
Right.
To do with my family, my mum and my kids. So I then stood, I think it was 2015, the election here in Harrogate and Knaresborough. I was parliamentary candidate.
Yeah.
But elections since then, we have actually stepped aside, I think on 2 occasions, we lose count now, because it's been clear that the important thing was to get rid of a government, the Conservative government, which was clearly going completely the wrong direction when it came to anything to do with climate, nature, people's welfare. It was clearly going further and further towards self-serving, looking after the rich and letting everybody else go to the dogs, and including nature. So it became, in this particular area, it seemed to be the right thing to do, as it was a Lib Dem target seat, to step aside and try to get rid of the Conservatives, but it didn't work. So on this occasion, we decided we would stand, but we have agreed that we will not door knock in this area. We will do hustings and we'll do a leaflet, and the same in Wetherby and Easingwold.
Right.
The other way round. So because there it's a new constituency, and if our candidate Arnold Warnican had 69% of the vote in the council elections, he's very well known in the area, and it's not a target for the other parties. So it's a green target now, And Compass, if you look on the Compass website, will say to people, if you want to get rid of the Tories, vote Lib Dem in Harrogate and Knaresborough, vote Green in Wetherby and Easingwold, and vote Labour in York Outer.
Right. Right. Okay.
So we think that's the only sensible way to deal with this dreadful first past the post voting system.
So would it be unfair to sort of sum up your position as, please love and admire our policies, but please vote for Lib Dems if you live in Harrogate and Knaresborough?
Yes, I think, but it's important we're there for those who really want to vote Green, and it also gives a message. So that balance between not splitting the vote, but getting enough votes that show where people are. I think it's giving people that choice. But yes, in this system, sadly, until we modernise our system to be sensible, we have to work in this kind of way.
Right. Okay. Well, that's helpful to unpack that a bit and just understand where you stand, because perhaps you've been a bit misreported on that, but it's useful to have your take on that. Okay, well let's go on to the policy bit and kind of where you stand. I mean, I've been through your manifesto this week and sort of pulled out the main things on climate action within it, and there's a lot there and a lot of detail, and I found myself reading and nodding and not putting many comments against many of them.
It's pretty good.
And thinking, well, that all sounds sensible, and I think for our members and supporters in Zero Carbon Harrogate, I would expect a lot of them to have similar sentiments to that. But I think it might be useful if you were to kind of highlight within those areas of, say, energy and transport and housing and food and farming particularly, where are the key things that you think would particularly be relevant and bite in the Harrogate and Knaresborough area?
Well, just to give one very glaring example, I tried to get here by bus just now, and from Knaresborough, from Bond End, and I came.
We're in Starbeck.
We're in Starbeck, and I went down to the bus stop, and with plenty of time, nothing came, and nothing had gone up the street, which suggests it's not going to come back down. And in the end, I had to run back home, grab the car, and drive over here. And I suspect that's happening to people all the time, or they're not. They've learned not to even bother going to try to go to the bus stop until there is political commitment to public transport. Instead of just talking about it, we won't get anywhere with getting people out of their cars. And North Yorkshire, I think, has traditionally been so car focused. It is a huge issue for this area to get really good public transport in. And in this day and age, with all the information technology we have, there is no excuse. It's not rocket science. It's about information. It's about clean buses, and it's about somewhere sensible and safe and dry. You can wait for a bus if it's raining and howling with wind and so on. You need a bus shelter with seats and information.
So how in big picture policy terms would you change the bus system?
Like many things, you would get it out of private hands, which is all about profit, and get it into public hands, as they've done in West Yorkshire. It used to be, and it needs to go back into public hands so that it's run for the people, not for profit. Okay. At the moment, profit is being siphoned out to, I think it's the French government with Transdev, isn't it?
Yes.
And we've got the same issue with the rivers, full of pollution, because it's in private hands. We've got the same issue with health, which is creeping privatisation. The government will not admit that's what they're doing, but they clearly are. They're copying America. That's the way we're going if we don't stop it. I was just watching on Twitter Harry Leslie Smith, actually, a little film of him talking to the TUC, saying, "My past will be your future if you don't do something about it. Hang on to the NHS. Don't let it go, and we're letting it go.
Okay. Well, rather than stray into those
let's
areas,
stick with transport.
We've dealt with buses, and I imagine that your
it should be integrated with trains,
would be
obviously.
very similar to that. What about other modes of transport? Whether it's cycling or aviation or
I don't fly.
freight, or what would the Green Party do?
One of the main things we can do is to hugely improve the routes between settlements so that you can cycle or walk. I mean, I was aiming to walk up here actually, but the footpaths are not good enough. If you draw a line between my house and here, there ought to be a footpath that makes it possible, but there isn't at the moment. And that's the same with so many places. And footpaths have either been lost or they need to be negotiated into the architecture of our transport system so that people can get fit, walk through the countryside, obviously being respectful to the countryside, including how their dogs behave, that kind of thing. And there's all that sort of infrastructure, and sadly a bike lane the Otley Road bike lane has been a massive controversy, and I would say that's because of just lack of committed consultation, real consultation with everybody. It seems to be so amateurish the way this kind of work has been done in this area, and probably a lot of areas, because there is just so much mind space filled up with cars, and people don't really take it seriously that we can walk or cycle.
So I mean, we are very car-based. You had to be car-based.
Yes, I was forced into it just now.
This morning. So what do we do about car owners? Are we kind of trying to price them off the road, or are we going to build more road capacity, or are we going to put parking very restricted? How do we deal with that? Because the majority of people, particularly in Harrogate and Knaresborough, would really value their cars.
Yes, of course, we all value our cars. We've got used to valuing them, so we've got to be helped out of them. That's government's job, and the Green Party wouldn't build more roads, for example. We would focus on getting the train lines back where we can, the small train lines, and proper public transport, as I say. And yes, we would gradually encourage people out of their cars through their pockets as well. It's the only way, in fact. And it would, subsidised public transport that runs on time will really help that. Once that's there, people will use it, but they're not going to use it until it's there.
Okay, that's useful. Can we sort of pivot on to energy? Because that's a massive part of decarbonising our society. Talk to me about your plans for that.
Right. Personally, my house has solar panels and an air source heat pump, and we got rid of the gas boiler the moment we got there. Which, there were things that needed to be done to the house, so that was one of the first things we did. And people should be helped to do that. There needs to be a massive programme, first of all, about reduction of use of energy in insulating houses. That would also create a lot of jobs. That there needs to be training, skills training, so that there's plenty of people to do all the work on insulation and renewables, but also designing houses. This is a wonderfully designed house, and designing houses to passive house standards is what should be the aim, and it is so far from the current aim, where new houses are being thrown up with gas boilers, roofs that can't even support solar panels in some cases, utterly short-sighted and irresponsible from governments. There's clearly some profit. The profit motive is leading to this distortion in house building on inappropriate sites as well. And the VAT on there isn't VAT on new build, where there is on retrofit.
Yeah.
So all the housing stock that should be retrofitted,
Yeah.
there is a barrier to doing that. It's harder for people
Indeed.
to do that,
Yeah.
which is just crazy. You know, we're not going to just bulldoze all our housing stock and put new stuff. So we have to be able to retrofit and have the skills and jobs to do that.
And skills are a very important part
Absolutely.
of the equation, as we found out with our local project here in, that we're running through the Energy Redress Fund, that we can't get the craftsmen to up their game. And
this is all because of government short-sightedness. They just have not looked ahead. They've refused to look ahead, clearly. It's in their interest, not our interest, to have left things in this state of neglect and regressive behaviour.
Okay, let's move on to food and farming, because as you've indicated from your past interest in animals, you know, that's a big area, and probably decarbonising agriculture and reducing the amount of carbon involved in the food that we love to eat is a real big challenge, perhaps even bigger than the things we've already talked about.
I think it is.
Talk to us about that.
I've just read somewhere that somewhere reliable that a third of food globally is wasted. A third. And I mean, I've got a book on waste by, I think, Tristram Stewart, which is a few years old now, but at every stage, from you've got it in the house and all the stuff that gets thrown away in the household to what the shop throws away, all the way down the system, that adds up to a third of it wasted. Now that's the thing we have to address first of all. Stop wasting it. The same as with energy. A major thing with really all the way we should behave is just stop wasting so much of everything. So in a sense, I see it as we've got to stop thinking in terms of growth and look at slower, a sort of more mindful way of living, really.
Right. Where
we travel, we don't rush about. Travelling, we don't rush about, so we just throw things away because we want that, so we throw this away. It's a different mindset, and so the whole business of measuring things by GDP growth is the wrong measurement. Bhutan seems to have it right, measuring with a happiness quotient instead of a growth quotient. Or you can think of growth differently, a different kind of growth. So coming back to the specific on food, I mean, I've been particularly concerned about what supermarkets are chucking out. Huge amounts of waste. And that's either poor management, just lack of respect, that they're clearly making enough money without worrying about all this waste.
Right.
And although there are attempts to sort this out and to try to use what is going towards the end of its sell-by date, it's not good enough because they're still throwing out huge amounts, even when community centres and so on are trying to rescue it. And people like Resurrected Bites are doing a fantastic job using surplus food and making meals of it. So there are attempts, and also I've in York we have a terraced house where we used to live when I worked there, which we've converted the corner shop room, it's a Victorian corner shop, into a little cafe, both as a community hub, but also to use waste food as the ingredients for the food in the cafe, and to have a community fridge. So we're trying to address it personally in that project, which is a sort of education project. But the Green Party has a very clear focus on sustainable agriculture, which is working much more closely with nature. So getting rid of the tremendous use of pesticides, which is decimating our insect population, leading to the absolute destruction of species of birds such as the swift, swallows, all those insect-eating birds. They're losing their food source. We have to work with nature. We cannot carry on behaving as though we are somehow above it. It doesn't matter. We're so special and so clever that we can manage by just killing nature and doing something else.
But I mean,
that's the fundamental.
That's really tough to see how you get that.
Yes.
You know, and
getting from where we are to
regenerative agriculture methods, but that's kind of almost telling the farmers that they've got to farm differently.
Not telling. I think a lot of farmers are trying to go in that direction anyway. That we've been through a so-called conventional farming. You know, people have been encouraged to use all these chemicals and fertilisers and all of that. But apparently, the big Oxford Farming Conference of the conventional farming, there is now a bigger conference on regenerative farming. So the farmers themselves are moving in that direction. They are close to nature. Those who, you know, who are understanding this are and that's a lot of them, are moving towards that kind of farming.
Right.
And that will, of course, improve the water quality as well, because of all the runoff from farming into the rivers.
Okay. Right, well, all this is going to cost money, isn't it? And you are very straight in your in setting out your maths in the manifesto and how you're going to fund all of this. But it's not cheap, is it?
No.
And I looked at a blog post by the very respected and independent Institute for Fiscal Studies, who did a little post on your when your manifesto was released. And so, you know, I'll read you a few bits of it. Some of their tax plans could raise substantial sum. The increase in national insurance contributions on those earning over 50,000 and the restriction of pension tax reliefs would affect a large number of high earners, the same group broadly hit hardest by the current government. Interrupt me at any time on this if you
I'm
disagree.
not sure about the same group hit hardest by the current government.
Right.
Not sure about that, but anyway.
Yeah. And this is an interesting one. Whether they could really raise over £90 billion from a carbon tax is doubtful, not least because the more successful the tax is at changing behaviour, the less it would raise. So obviously you use tax in order to change behaviour, but then you lose the tax thing. And I think we've seen that with electric vehicles, for instance, that you know, having no tax payment, road tax payment, encourages and avoiding a lot of the petrol and diesel duties encourages people to switch, which is great. One restricting upfront income tax relief on pension contributions would also be difficult to achieve and would hit a lot of workers on not terribly high salaries, many nurses and teachers, for example. So it does come quite low down the income scale. I know you've got wealth tax that are really going to hit the uber rich, but it will kind of impact on some middle income earners as well. Is that fair?
In this country, our attitude towards taxes is different from, say, Scandinavia, where there's an acceptance that you have to pay taxes if you want good public services.
Right.
And I think we have to consider that, so that, yes, some more middle earners will be their tax hike, there will be higher taxes for them, but it's very much with the Green proposals with the very rich. And there are a lot of very rich people. There's a lot of people, you know, people who go on holiday, have yachts, have huge houses, there's a lot of that, far too much of it, grotesque wealth, grotesque inequality. And our manifesto aims to redress that huge imbalance. So yes, some of the sort of more middle income people will find there's a bit more, but it's the very rich that we're trying to bring, you know, make more responsible in terms of what they pay for.
Right.
And yes, it's all a huge balancing act. It's massive. But we have to have a clear direction of travel. And if we want our public services, we're going to have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Those who can. But we shouldn't be putting the tax burden on poorer people.
No. And to the other side of the coin is you're, for instance, advocating a significant increase in minimum wage and
Yes.
things like that. So
yeah, citizens' income, and of course, if you've got better public services, pretty much free public transport, and all of that, life will be easier for everybody, which will take a big burden off the people with less income.
Okay. The conclusion of that blog post said, it's clear where the Green Party's ambitions lie, a much bigger role for the state, better funded public services, and of course a swifter transition to net zero.
Yeah,
here.
Exactly.
It's unlikely that the specific tax raising measures they propose to help achieve this would raise the sorts of sums they claim, and certainly not without real economic cost. Now, you talked about earlier about the sort of, you feel there's a sort of obsession with GDP.
Yeah. And that's where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That you have to think who they are and what they've been used to. We have to change our mindset. We are in an existential crisis.
Right.
We have to change our criteria, and they haven't done that. You know, the Bank of England, all these establishment organisations have got to change their mindset. They're far from doing that. So they'll be working everything out. Oh, it costs a lot. Well, it's going to cost an awful lot more if we're all going extinct and taking all the other species with us.
Okay, well that's very clear, and the whole thing is very clear because you haven't pulled your punches in the manifesto, so we know where we stand. If we
yes, you know where you stand with the Green Party. You have to make your mind up whether you care really about the future.
Indeed. Okay.
So it's about real hope, real change.
Indeed. Okay. Well, let's assume that everyone who wants to vote Green does vote Green, and we'll whisk you into Westminster.
That would be wonderful.
What would you kind of expect from organisations like Zero Carbon Harrogate? Because as you kind of hinted several times, it needs changes hearts and minds as well as political systems. So how do we continue to work with a new government of whatever flavour it is to be effective?
I think what you're doing is fantastic. I mean, the very fact that you've set up this interviewing the candidates, so it's all about information, isn't it? Getting the information out there, and here you are doing that very thing. So that in itself is fantastic. Getting the information out into the public realm and organising discussion and getting people thinking about what really matters. Right. So I think you're doing a great job at that.
Okay, thank you for that. And there's also the issue that we see a lot of politicians once every 5 years because they want our vote, but actually as a responsible organisation, whoever gets elected, we want to hold them to account so that the fine words that come out in pre-election period actually get put into practice.
Yes, holding people to account.
Tough decisions.
Exactly. What is it? The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. So holding to account.
Who said that?
I think, well, it's been attributed to, I think, Edmund Burke, but I think that there's queries about that, but I think it's a good thing to say, whoever said it. But I think if Zero Carbon Harrogate can hold to account whoever is elected, that's a very important role.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, because I've learned a lot about you that I didn't know before, and it's been good to go through the nitty-gritty of the policy as well. We should be seeing you on Wednesday evening at our Climate Hustings event in the Wesley Centre in the middle of Harrogate. So if you're watching this online, do sign up and give us your questions as well. The questions close on Monday night at midnight. So if you have got questions you'd like to ask of Shan and the other candidates, please register those and we'll use them on Wednesday evening. Thank you for your time. You're a very busy person at the moment, I'm sure, but it's been great to talk to you, and best wishes with the rest of your campaign.
Thank you very much, Tim.